Welcome to the Decentralized News podcast, where we report the major events affecting the crypto economy. I am your host, Piter, joined as always by Aussie. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great.
So what's big in crypto this week?
Lots is big, but the thing I think no one can escape is the US election right now. If Twitter were to be the chief of it, you'd see quite a bit on Kamala Harris's new comments, most recent comments, some comments from the Trump event that happened down, I think in Florida, but I'm not 100% sure where in the US last night as well. I know a few people that were there.
Sure, I just remember the American flag pants video that stood up. There was a guy with just some bold pants, bold.
And then some other news just around CZ's upcoming release, Caroline Ellison sentencing coming up, and some kind of news about Tether and stablecoins.
All right, let's kick it off. We had comments from Harris and the Harris campaign about crypto. She was at a Wall Street fundraiser and vowed to encourage investment in AI and digital assets. So she related it to basically as important as AI, which I thought was probably the most bullish part of it. But the quote goes like this: "We will partner together to invest in America's competitiveness, to invest in America's future. We will encourage innovative technologies like AI and digital assets while protecting our consumers and investors." So there's still,
There's a pretty big caveat.
that's so cool. Anyway, comments done the same.
Yeah, that's it. They're interesting comments because it's the first time she's talked about it at all up until this point. She has essentially avoided the topic very much through her entire campaign, but she mentions it at this Wall Street
That makes me
fundraiser.
think she even might have tried to avoid it if she could, but it's just, she has to make a comment. It's encouraging, even if you don't want it.
Yeah, and for Wall Street, AI is probably the more important part because Nvidia is pretty big leader in the stock market at this point, but even then the Bitcoin ETFs and the ETH ETFs also play a role with the potential of an options on the BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF launching soon. That's pretty interesting. I really don't know if it's super bullish comments. I think the while protecting our consumers and investors could essentially mean towing the line that they've already been towing because they allowed the ETFs. Any new Web3 companies are still going to face C prosecution. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, it's not much, but it's something. And it's just exciting to see a coin be inserted into this election season. This is just an increase in that. This is continued adoption with a comment from Harris. But it's not nearly as forward leaning as Trump's comments have. And at this event, I think it was last night, when he was talking about the future of crypto, Trump responded that he thinks crypto's got a great future and floated the idea of using it to pay off $35 trillion US debt, which I think is related to a bill from Cynthia Loomis. They were talking about that. Well, he also last week made a little bit of a splash, becoming the first president or former president to use Bitcoin to make a purchase. He bought a burger in a Bitcoin bar, bit of an event, pouring the wall, anticlimactic watching the transaction go through. I think it took forever to settle first.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin's usually almost half an hour to settle.
Yeah, I think they waited nothing. It didn't even finally settle or something like that before he left. Before they were like, all right, it did happen. The purchase did go through.
And then he did have a big event yesterday and I think it's for his NFT collection holders. I believe Not a Thread guy was there and settled the Polymarket's bet of whether or not a Thread guy would interview Trump before October. He did. He got to ask a question. Our buddy Jesse Eckel was there. Sandeep apparently from Polygon was there. So was Mark Boiron from Polygon. Yeah, and then some of the guys behind the Big Time game were also there. Crypto game. Quite a few big names in crypto, and then the business development guy from Magic Eden was also there. So quite a few crypto folks there, and it'll be interesting to see how much further Trump goes in his support for crypto. Trump has responded that he thinks crypto has a great future, and although he has also said that if he loses, he won't run in 2028. So
you did say that?
yeah, so that was also
I
kind
was
of an
wondering that because like everyone is sick of him. It's like beating him might be the worst thing that could happen because you'll have to deal with him 4 years from now again. It's all over again.
yeah. So that was another comment of his that came out, and so he did interview with Rug Radio last week as well. So he's on a pretty crypto friendly outlet. It's Rug Radio. Although I think he interviewed with Farouk, who's a Canadian. He's actually Montrealer from right around where I am as well. So pretty interesting to see Trump's approach.
We'll see if this has any effect, just any comments from the Harris campaign, because I'm sure there is a percentage of people that just wanted to hear something, like any excuse to vote, to not have to vote for Trump. So
There,
I'm sure it will influence some, but she certainly hasn't been as bullish. I think you, if you're into the space or that's like you're a single issue voter and it's Bitcoin and crypto, I think it's still hard not to vote for Trump.
yeah, there's definitely been some comments from big players in the space that were praising the comments. The chief of policy said that this was an important statement from Kamala. Kamala. I know that there was some comments from some other big people in the crypto space, like saying, "Oh, this is great." It's a big step forward, but not necessarily earth shattering.
Okay, let's turn the page because CZ gets to turn the page. He's going to get out of prison.
Yeah, he gets out of prison on September 29th. This is pretty interesting. He getting out on good behavior 15 days after reporting to the low security prison where he was being held.
Yeah, I think
So
he got a 6 month sentence and he's getting out in 4. He was in like a low security prison in the last month. It was at a like halfway house. So yeah, he's going to be out. I think it's exciting for especially people in the space who have been through the bear market and watched this whole thing unfold. I don't know how exciting it is for people outside the space, but I feel like it's a little bit bullish for those of us who've been here watching this whole bear market unfold.
yeah, there's been some meme coins coming out around CZ because of him getting out of prison. Some are wondering whether BNB is going to pop off because CZ gets out.
I
Speculative.
read somewhere, and yeah, do your own research, but that he can't be involved with finance anymore.
Yeah, part of the rule, part of the settlement was he can't be CEO and he can't be involved.
But he could potentially another project, right? Possibly.
He could.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it'll
I
be
mean,
interesting to see
it's
what he
wild.
does.
Just Richard Tang is the guy who took over. He was a former regulator in both Abu Dhabi and Singapore. He's done a good job with finance in his stead.
Absolutely. And we've definitely been seeing this holding its ground even despite the change, although the chain seems to be dying out a little bit from what I can tell. It's interesting to see, and they've resisted getting shut down in more countries since the chain and I think they've managed to open up in a couple as well. So that's been good for them. An interesting fact about CZ is he's
Yeah,
estimated to be the richest person to ever go to prison in the US.
25.3 billion. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a good. Congratulations, CZ.
Yeah.
Then that makes him the richest person ever get out of prison too. So,
Yeah. Now, as he's getting out of prison, the other kind of big foe of this bull market and this bear market is potentially going to prison. Caroline Ellison is getting sentenced tomorrow for her role in the FTX fraud. If you want to take a gamble at which sentence she gets, also on poly markets,
oh, what is the expectations?
right now it's split 40% no prison time, but no prison time does not mean she doesn't get house arrest. It just means she doesn't have to she doesn't serve any time in prison. 40% is saying between 1 month and 24 months. So
So 2 years would be harsh. A little bit of jail time seems likely, maybe none.
yeah, and then there's about 5% of people that are seeing that she goes to jail for more than 36 months, which I don't. She was the star witness in CZ's case, in the case against SBF, so I don't necessarily think she gets the.
He's in jail now, right? Like how
He
long?
got years on
Yes.
his main sentence, but he got several consecutive sentences, so I think it amounts to something like 175 years in prison or something like that for his role. He's the big bad one. He's getting hammered, and it looks like Caroline is going to get off fairly scot-free. Whether she gets 36 months of house arrest, that's possible, and maybe banned from being involved in certain financial institutions, but overall does not look like she'll be getting a severe sentence.
All right, we had some news out of a U.S. state. Louisiana state government officially announced it accepts Bitcoin and crypto as a valid form of payments. And they even took their first cryptocurrency payments. They processed a fine. So just an example of what it will be used for. A fine to the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries using the Bitcoin Lightning Network. Although they're not holding it, they just sell it straight. It's interesting that it's a little bit of sell pressure, even though it's bullish adoption.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. I guess you don't have to take on the capital gains tax, and so that's the trade-off.
Yeah. As a form of payment, you can use USDC Circle as well. Gotta give them a shout out.
Yeah, so interesting. Louisiana isn't the only state that takes Bitcoin payments. There's a few others. Ohio was originally taking tax payments, but that platform seems to be defunct. There's a county in Florida. Florida is supposed to be making businesses allowed to pay their taxes in crypto. Colorado.
The governor supports it as promised it, but yeah, it hasn't happened yet.
Colorado's announced that it would begin accepting crypto tax payments in 2022. Utah as well. California has the DMV using blockchain, and then
that's one of the more interesting use cases I've seen. They're using like a AVAX subnet to do car registration.
So they were originally supposed to do this on Tezos, and now they've moved to AVAX. That's pretty interesting. I have no clue. That's probably why they moved to AVAX. And then the one kind of interesting in the most recent development outside of Louisiana is that a Republican, Matt Gaetz from Florida, introduced a bill that would allow Americans to settle their federal income tax obligations using Bitcoin.
That sounds exciting if we have it as a reserve more than if we're just going to sell it.
Yeah, if you were to get like a strategic reserve so that any Bitcoin that the U.S. government gets from either crime or from tax settlements remains that way, then that could be interesting.
A smaller amount, maybe they can afford to hold it, and that's the idea: is right, hold it for a little while, then you can pay off all this.
Yeah, that's it. So it'll be interesting to see if that passes. There's no other news on that one other than that, but just interesting adoption in the U.S.
It's not like game theory, the big Bitcoin game theory stories. And there's one out of Bhutan. We reported on them a while ago, and quietly they have now become the fourth largest holder of Bitcoin as far as nation states are concerned.
And they're not a big nation state. Let's be very clear.
No, but they have it's like hydroelectric power, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, from the Himalayas.
They've been developing mining. They're a Himalayan nation. They're in between like China and India. Fewer than 1 million people, accumulated over 750 million in Bitcoin, representing nearly a third of its GDP. That's how much they hold. That's pretty significant. And it's through mining operations. They've been working with BitDeer, and they have a state-owned drug. It looks like drunk, but there's no N in it. It's DRUK Holdings. And yeah, so quietly, and maybe some will follow now that they're seeing the success of it.
Yeah, I mean,
13,000 Bitcoin.
That's a lot of Bitcoin. And the fact that they're investing in mining as a small country, they're less than 1 million people. They're smaller than a lot of major U.S. cities, most major U.S. cities. That's pretty wild. And it shows like mining, the hash rate has hit new difficulties, new all-time highs on difficulties and on hash rate, with more and more companies investing in mining and expanding their operations, even in the last 6 months when we've seen such a sideways and down price action. Definitely interesting to see.
And the reduction in the reward.
Yeah. So really pretty bullish in terms of Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin adoption and that game theory right now.
More nation states getting into it. Yeah, that would really push the hash rate up.
Oh, absolutely. Now, one One player that is also helping push up the hash rate and definitely involved in Bitcoin is Tether. They've got pretty good market domination in terms of the stablecoin market at about 75% adoption and market share, which is up from 55% in the past 2 years. I think part of this has to do with Luna. There's a bunch of stablecoins that were in Luna stablecoin, which is obviously now gone. And
Yeah, USDC had some issues too because they had one of the banks they were involved with went under or something like that.
yeah, so
They took a knockback, although they've been doing well also recently. I read today 50% of the stablecoin transactions are actually with USDC, even though they don't have as big of a market share in terms of their market cap. So they've had some success in this bear market as well.
yeah, and there's now like some very interesting transactions you can do with USDC that are really bullish for adoption. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with USDC, whether they can compete and maybe outcompete Tether or what happens. Tether announced a massive profit, 5.2 billion in the first half of 2024. That's absolutely insane to think about.
Yeah, to put it in context, there's a tweet that I read. I forget who it was from, but it seemed pretty credible. But that it beat out BlackRock's revenue for the same period.
That's insane.
To put it in for a little bit of perspective.
Yeah. 1.3 billion of that was in the second quarter, so they profited more in the first quarter from the looks of it. And since 2022 in September, they've been increasing their Bitcoin reserves quarterly, and about 15% of their net income is Bitcoin purchases, and Tether now holds 75,354 Bitcoin, worth about $4.8 billion. They haven't discussed any of their future plans, but there was talk, and they have been involved in talks about mining with Uruguay, Paraguay, and El Salvador, all being involved in mining talks with Tether. So interesting to see what Tether does in this bull run and what kind of happens. Do we get a Tether token?
You start to get revenue, some form of revenue share.
Yeah.
No wonder BlackRock's getting into it. Here's this company with percent in terms of the labor force. Like what kind of, they have famous for having no employees, Tether.
Yeah.
BlackRock dude is huge. No wonder they're getting in the coin. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's it. They're like, we can do that.
Speaking of BlackRock, there was a little bit of a scuttlebutt over this paper Bitcoin with Coinbase because they're handling the settlements basically. It was just an IOU, it wasn't actual Bitcoin. It's not settled on chain, so people can verify. And the CEO came out and said, "We never promised it wouldn't not be centralized. You have to trust us, basically, like to a certain degree." But just today, BlackRock amended its spot Bitcoin ETF custody agreement with Coinbase to improve withdrawal times. And now Coinbase must process BTC withdrawals to a public assets address within 12 hours of receiving instruction. So I thought that was pretty good news.
Yeah. There was people that were accusing Coinbase of paper Bitcoin. They technically, I think, before had 72 or either 7 days or 72 hours to settle these transactions. And part of the FUD was that Coinbase wouldn't disclose the addresses where the Bitcoin was being held. And basically said because they didn't want the wallets dusted.
Just in contrast, like one of the smaller ETF, I think it's Bitwise, they do show that. So it's possible, but yeah, it's just a different strategy. The market will, and to a certain degree, the market will decide which ones they like the best. Like,
yeah, and does Bitwise? I didn't think Bitwise did, but
there was one of the smaller ones. It may not be Bitwise. I think it's Bitwise, but there's one that shows all the address. So it is a possibility. It's really meant.
Yeah, it's absolutely a possibility. Coinbase manages all of them as far as I'm aware in terms of a custody perspective. BlackRock must have just, from an accounting perspective and like a security perspective or an AML perspective, has not wanted to disclose their addresses at this point. It's going to be interesting to see.
But they do want to look like a fair player in the market, and hence this improvement. And they, like you mentioned, the authors, They're going to be options trading.
With the Bitcoin ETF for BlackRock, I don't know if it's
like a fair player in the space. They're going to be offering you products.
Yeah, I don't know if it's officially been approved, but I know that it's definitely been applied for. So it'll be interesting to see if it actually does come into place. While you go verify my information, let's just look a little bit of macro, because BlackRock owning 2% of supply is not enough macro for you. There's a lot more around 2% that we should talk about. US inflation has fallen to 2.5% year over year, which was lower than the expectations. And this was led to the Federal Reserve cutting interest rates by 50 basis points, which is the first time they've done that in 4 years. The first time they've done a cut in 4 years. And one of the bigger cuts, the first time that they cut with 50 basis points as the first cut, was back in 2007. So some people are raising some fear alarms about that. So we're keeping in consideration. Looking at interest rates for the next couple meetings, they've got 2 more meetings, one at the start of November and one in middle of December. Right now, it's a pretty even split between a quarter basis point cut and a 50 basis point cut. We'll see what happens. Right now,
Or 100% continued cuts that we've entered this new cycle.
yeah, there's a slight advantage right now to only a quarter basis point cut with at 51%, and then a slight disadvantage to a double cut, just like we had. So it'll be interesting to see. With December being even more 100% cut, with anywhere between one cut holding steady at 23% if we get one cut, but 75% saying there's either going to be another cut or 2 cuts from there. It's quite a big difference. They're talking about potentially coming down an entire percentage point in 2024.
It seemed like in past rate cut situations or when it started, it didn't necessarily affect the market so quickly. Are you surprised at all by that?
It doesn't surprise me totally, because right now we're still seeing fears of recession. Recession fears are pretty strong right now. Unemployment's ticking up. Inflation still hasn't necessarily hit 2%. In the US, not as much, but in Canada, there's definitely, like, consumer spending's way down in Canada. We've seen unemployment tick up. We actually hit 2% inflation year over year in Canada in the most recent things and readings. We're kind of seeing like some recession fears, is whether the economy is going to slow down, and we're waiting to see whether that recession fear is real or whether people are just overreacting. And usually it's a combination of the two. We're either already in a recession and it doesn't matter, and by cutting rates we're going to get out of it, or we're not actually going to go into a recession because the economy is so strong and the labor market just might soften a little bit.
Yeah, the whole soft landing.
Yeah, soft landing, hard landing, we'll see. Normally we need 3/4 basis points, so 75%, 0.75% cut before we really see Bitcoin starting to take off. So by all accounts, that should be happening in November, which lines up awfully well with the election.
And then you have Q4 traditionally being a good performing quarter.
Yeah, on general principles, it usually doubles in Q4 based off of average statistics in pre-bull run years. So that, to give you an idea, that's not perfect math and definitely isn't financial advice, but worthwhile noting.
Just this week, there's home sales numbers coming out. And then next week, there's PCE inflation index, and maybe more importantly, unemployment numbers. So we'll see if those continue to stay hot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because those will definitely play a part in whether we flip on interest rates even more. Do we see another 50 basis point cut? We'll see. We'll see as we approach November.
Let's get into the speed run. Solana had their Breakpoint conference, and there's usually a bunch of press releases that come out. There are a lot of articles and announcements, so we can get into some of those. A Sol restaking protocol, Sol Layer, announced yield-bearing stablecoin SUSDC in a restaking partnership with real-world asset Open Eden. This one I thought was interesting. 1.3 trillion asset manager Franklin Templeton plans to launch a mutual fund on the blockchain. Interesting form of adoption. And there was also this talk about Frankendancer and Fire Dancer. So Frankendancer goes live on Solana mainnet and Fire Dancer on testnet. I guess it makes 1 million transactions per second possible. So Solana always wants to be fast. And they also unveiled a new mobile phone called Seeker. Those are always fun little ads.
Yeah,
See them all.
absolutely interesting. The whole phone thing is interesting with Solana.
No one seems to ever have made like this. The phone seems like an interesting idea. It seems like no one's been able to break through with a blockchain phone. There's another biometric financial. They have like one called the Phoenix. They launched it in Africa or something like that. But yeah, it's interesting to see this kind of development. It's exciting, but yeah, hard to compete with.
Yeah, there were some pretty interesting announcements in the most recent iPhone announcement. Outside of that, Build on Bitcoin announces Bob Stake, which is a one-click portal for Bitcoin liquid staking.
I love
So
the name of this one, Bob. Build on Bitcoin. I don't know,
it
that just sticks with me a little bit.
it
Like,
was like Bob was like the funny name as like when we were kids in terms of Bob. Yeah, I love the name. And then the other one is Threshold TBTC becomes the first Bitcoin restaking asset on Eigenlayer, which is one of the airdrop opportunities that we've talked about on this channel, and kind of looking at restaking on a broader level and security. So interesting there.
I know a lot of people wondering what's going to bring retail back to DeFi. What's the exciting thing being developed in DeFi? And this Bitcoin liquid staking seems like a bit of a dark horse that might be able to build some interest for DeFi.
It could be a dark horse. I'm still on gaming and AI personally, but it's definitely a worthwhile dark horse to talk about. Bitcoin and this liquid restaking is pretty exciting.
There, we got Wallet Connect. I've never used it, but I always see it. But they're introducing a token and announced an airdrop. Pancake Swap has introduced a prediction Telegram bot. And you can go on to the next one. Well,
Oh, fine. CCIP has been launched on ZK Sync DL2, so it'll be interesting to see Chainlink's continuing to go places. Does the token price go somewhere? Outside of that, ZK Sync also announced that their governance system has gone live, and Eigenlayer's Season 2 airdrop is now available for claiming with about 5.2% of supply allocated to it. That being said, there's so much more news and everything going on every day. I'm out on Twitter Spaces in a lot of places, so come join me on Twitter Spaces and come back to the show. Don't be a stranger. Come like and subscribe. Do your own research and make sure that you realize this is not financial advice. We are not financial advisors, but we appreciate you tuning in and highly suggest you come back.
thanks, everybody. See you all next week. Thanks for tuning in.